Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we're going to completely dismantle a myth that has been absolutely drilled into us for years. I'm talking about the idea that academic success requires this endless, painful, exhausting grind. Look, we've all been there, right? Staring at a massive mountain of homework late at night, thinking if I just suffer through this for a few more hours, I'll eventually get the grades I want. But science tells us a very different story. First off, let's validate that overwhelming burden of homework you face. It is heavy. It's a lot. But here's the really fascinating part. Sometimes pushing harder without an actual strategy makes things way worse. We tend to treat studying as just a measure of time logged at a desk. But the latest neurobiology and behavioral science shows us that academic excellence is really about cognitive efficiency. It's about how effectively you sort out your daily routine, manage your brain's hardware, and approach your tasks, not just how much suffering you can endure. So let's dive right into our 4-part framework to completely overhaul your routine. We're going to cover overcoming the procrastination trap, fueling your biological engine, hacking your task management, and finally, applying the science of active recall. All right, part 1, the procrastination trap. Let's figure out how to actually overcome those emotional blocks. We've got to address the emotional elephant in the room here. When you look at your to-do list and immediately open a new tab to watch a video, trust me, you are not alone. Up to 70% of university students chronically delay their work. 70%! It's a massive, widespread issue. But when we dig into the psychological research, it turns out we fundamentally misunderstand the root cause of the problem. You see, it's not for the reasons you might think, and it is definitely not a character flaw. The common myth is that you're just lazy or terrible at time management. But the actual fact, procrastination is an emotional regulation problem. Think about it. When you face an overwhelming assignment, your brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, perceives that difficult task as a literal physical danger. It triggers anxiety, a fear of failure, maybe even a fear of imperfection, and that causes your brain to desperately seek immediate mood repair through distraction. You aren't lazy at all. Your brain is literally just trying to protect you from stress. So, the absolutely crucial first step here is dropping the guilt. Blaming yourself and feeling guilty only deepens those feelings of incompetence. And guess what? That just triggers your amygdala all over again, keeping you stuck in that exact same cycle of avoidance. You have to start with self-compassion. Talk to yourself like you would a friend who's struggling. Acknowledge that the work is hard, and it's totally okay to feel stressed. Validating those feelings actually calms your brain's threat response down, so you can finally begin to work. Moving right along to part 2, your brain's biological engine. Because honestly, you cannot run high-level cognitive software on broken biological hardware. The foundation of managing your academic load efficiently is routine physical maintenance. Now, I know it sounds like the ultimate cliche to just say drink water, but the human brain is literally made up of nearly 73% water. 73! Because of this, your brain cells are incredibly sensitive to fluid levels. Dehydration actually reduces blood volume and decreases oxygen delivery to your brain, which directly impacts your ability to concentrate and learn. To put that into perspective, losing just 1 to 2% of your body's fluid, which is barely even considered mild dehydration, causes a massive 12 to 18% delay in cognitive processing and reaction times. Just let that sink in for a second. If you sit down to tackle a massive homework load without a glass of water, you are intentionally slowing your brain's processing speed by up to 18% right out of the gate. Crazy, right? But you can easily fix this. You can actively build a biological routine to boost concentration by hitting some very specific targets. Drink 200 to 300 milliliters of water right before starting a demanding task. Then, fiercely guard your 7 to 9 hours of sleep nightly, because that is when your brain actually consolidates memories. In fact, research shows good sleep gives you a 12% performance boost. Add in short daily bursts of exercise to lower stress hormones like cortisol, and you're golden. Doing this physical routine literally rewires your brain to handle a heavier workload with way less effort. All right, part 3, hacking your task management. Now that the engine is primed, it's time to hack your workflow and creatively manage the actual burden of homework. One of the absolute best ways to bypass that perfectionism causing your procrastination is to deliberately lower the stakes. Just force yourself to write a really crappy rough draft, or try stream of consciousness writing. Just type whatever pops into your head, even if it's literally, I have absolutely no idea what to write here. See, the goal isn't quality. The goal is simply breaking the friction of starting so you can get that momentum flowing. And when you feel that sudden urge to delay, to check your phone or just walk away from your desk, Use author Mel Robbins' famous 5-second rule. Just count backward 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and physically move to start the task. It sounds too simple, but this countdown is actually a psychological intervention. It interrupts your brain's habit loop of overthinking and forces your prefrontal cortex, your decision-making center, to activate before fear can stop you. To shrink that overwhelming feeling even further, take your huge mountain of homework and break it down into can-do goals. That means making every single step clear, appropriate, numerical, doable, and with obstacles considered. So instead of a vague goal like, I need to study biology, a can-do goal is, I will read 10 pages of the biology chapter and write 5 flashcards in the next 45 minutes while my phone is in the other room. Boom. It completely strips away the uncertainty that fuels your procrastination. And finally, part 4, the science of active recall. Let's look at how to actually process information correctly so you spend way less time grinding. The biggest mistake we see students make is passive studying. Transcribing a lecture verbatim or just endlessly rereading notes. That completely bypasses actual cognitive processing. It just creates an illusion of competence. You feel like you know the material because it looks familiar, but you really don't. Instead, you have to actively engage. Close the book and try to explain the concept simply, as if you're teaching a beginner. That's the famous Feynman technique. Or try blurting, where you just write down absolutely everything you can remember on a blank page and then check to see what you missed. You can even tailor this active engagement right there in the classroom by picking the right note-taking system. If you're in a really dense, fact-based lecture, the Cornell method is fantastic because it builds active recall directly into your notes with a dedicated cue column for self-testing. But if you're in a highly conceptual subject, try flow notes. Draw arrows, make connections in your own words. It forces you to deeply process the material in real time. Now, let's talk about the 2-3-5-7 spaced repetition method. Decades ago, Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered the forgetting curve, which basically maps out how incredibly fast our brains dump new information. Well, this timeline is your ultimate weapon against that curve. You summarize after the lesson, you test yourself the next day, try blurting 3 days later, and then target your weak spots a week later. By strategically spacing out these retrieval sessions, you are physically strengthening your neural pathways. It makes the memory rock solid, using a fraction of the usual study time. So, bringing this whole shebang together, overcoming the procrastination trap, optimizing your biological engine, hacking your task management, and utilizing active recall. When you actually combine these 4 elements, you completely transform an overwhelming academic burden into a highly efficient, well-oiled system. The homework load doesn't necessarily change, but how you manage it does. It stops being a soul-crushing grind and starts being a science. Now, you don't have to change everything all at once. That's the beauty of this framework. But picking just one science-backed strategy today, whether that's drinking a glass of water before you study, writing a terrible first draft, or giving the Feynman technique a shot, that can entirely redefine your academic potential. So I'll leave you with this. What is the one variable you are going to change today to start working smarter and not harder? Welcome back.